the same.
She said what?
Hey, man, we get it. We're good here. They fired Uncle Ben. Everything's fine. Now get out of my house.
Or what? You gonna call the police?
Oh, you're trying to... No, I'm not gonna... Okay? Fine. I'll take it.
Great. Knew it. That makes sense.
5 hour empathy for when they just don't get it.
All right, so what did you guys do for spring break? Part 2.
Went to Kalahari
You did?
yesterday.
You did something. Congratulations. How was Kalahari?
It was good. I've never been there before.
I kind of toyed with going there not too long ago, but did you have to wear masks and stuff in the water park?
No.
Really?
You like, they tried to enforce it like if you were just like sitting at like your tables and stuff, but like if you were,
If you're actively eating or drinking.
yeah, or participating in a water activity.
Water activity.
Yay!
That would be always. All right, well, one person did something. I'm actually surprised. I thought maybe 1 or 2 of you would show up.
I was supposed to go to the beach, but they shut it down. I could not even be here.
Which beach did they shut down?
Miami, Florida, Miami.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's alright.
All right, well, today, the fun we have in store is to talk about 2 other diseases that lead to dementia. So, just so you know, and this says other dementia, this should say other diseases. Just keep in mind, dementia is just the broad umbrella term that means there's some type of cognitive impairment that's led to some type of maladaptivity. And there's different diseases that get us there. Alzheimer's is the one that everyone talks about for good reason, because it makes up what percentage of dementia? Do you remember this ballpark? It's a lot. If you're going to say 70, you're right. So Alzheimer's disease leads to 70% of our dementia cases. That's enormous. And I thought of, well, which ones could we actually talk about live? And I thought, well, maybe we'll start with number 2. That seems to make sense. And you're probably writing a bunch of stuff down, and I'm going to ruin your notes in about 5 minutes by reorganizing things, but that's okay. So there's also going to be a brief online lecture attached this week. Like you, I took advantage of the rest days. So if I get a rest day, I do a rest day. And so after today's class, and I see, my goal, of course, as always, is to bring us right up to the point where Team A stopped. I'm pretty sure we'll do that. There's 4 diseases left that we're going to talk about all together. We've got vascular dementia, we'll do that today. We have Parkinson's disease, which a lot of people don't correlate with dementia. We'll talk about that today. And then something called frontotemporal dementia, which I find terribly frightening. Then another one called Lewy body dementia, which I also find just inherently. I find all of these frightening. I think that's the big fear with dementia, right? Is you don't want to lose yourself, and that's kind of what dementia leads to, is eventually losing yourself. But let's get started with vascular dementia. This is number 2 on the list, and it accounts for 15% of all cases of dementia. So if you're doing the math, just with these 2 alone, we've covered 85% of patients. Vascular dementia is not some type of insidious disease that leads to your brain disintegrating from the inside out, like Alzheimer's disease. There's no plaques, there's no tangles. It kind of is maybe what it sounds like. Vascular dementia is caused by a lack of blood flow to several parts of the brain. Bless you. Thank you. So a lack of blood flow to the brain. And the reason I put location up there is depending on where the lack of blood flow to the brain is, that's where we're going to see the cognitive impairment happen. So this is the type of dementia that we talk about after someone suffers a stroke or a series of strokes. Just to kind of, I know I'm cheating here, and I guess it's on there, but just ordering it in my head. Forget everything that's right here, just forget for now. This is Parkinson's disease. We're going to get to that in about 15 minutes. There are 2 end games here to vascular dementia. I guess it's up there, so MMID. Something called post-stroke dementia. Yeah, you guys get the benefit. After I talk about this with Team A, I sit back and I realize there was a more succinct way to describe this. Post-stroke dementia is the dementia that occurs after a major, like, one-time stroke. But the more insidious kind, which is thought to be a lot more common, is what's known as multi-infarct dementia. Multi-infarct dementia is the type of dementia that is caused by a cascade of what we call mini strokes inside the brain. Multi-infarct dementia also has another name, which confuses people, especially if you watch a video on it. Like, wait a second. It's called cerebral small vessel disease. So far, so good? All right. Let's just take a break. Yeah, the other thing I wrote, the other thing I wrote up there was post-stroke and then multi-infarct, which is technically already up there. Sorry, wonderful position for you to be in with the board. So let's actually take a look at a case. This is Audrey. Audrey is the one that suffers from dementia. She suffers from the classic case of multi-infarct dementia. It's something that's progressed probably over a period of decades. The really terrible thing about multi-infarct dementia is it typically begins in our limbic system, which of course is next to what? Our hippocampus, right? But again, this isn't plaques and tangles that's killing the blood cells. And by the way, apoptosis is still the result, a death of neurons. So neurons can be killed by not talking to each other, by communication being blocked, and they can also, of course, be killed by blood flow not going to the neuron. So same result, apoptosis, but completely different cause. Here's these.
I would dearly love there to be a treatment for vascular dementia. All right, it would probably be too late for Audrey, but I can honestly say from the bottom of my heart, I don't want other people to go through what Audrey's been through and what I've been through. We got married in West Ham Registry Office on Christmas Eve 1952, and so we've been married for over 60 years. We went out shopping for curtains in John Lewis on Oxford Street, and I had forgotten to bring the measurements. And so I said, well, you go up to John Lewis and sort out what sort of curtains you like, and I'll go back up and get the measurements and I'll meet you up there. Well, when I got there, she was sitting on the pile of carpets with assistants crowded around her, and they thought she'd fainted, but of course it wasn't. She'd actually had a stroke. For years, nobody actually used the word dementia, but they talked about memory loss. Now I knew because I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, but it was dementia, and so eventually I think that I started talking about dementia, and so other people then talked about dementia. There is no known cure for dementia at the moment, no question about that. And when you've got someone you love going down with that, it is absolutely devastating to think, well, there's nothing that can even alleviate it.
I can't do anything on my own. This is the worst thing, because before that I'd go out and drive off to the shops or go and see friends or something, and now I can't do anything.
No.
I feel that I can, but I know that I'm not capable of doing it.
A bad day with Audrey is she doesn't want to get up. She doesn't want to come downstairs.
And I just can't move.
Then if she finally gets into the chair, she just sits there in a panic and she gets nausea. She won't eat at all. She'll go back to bed and hopefully the next day she'll have changed.
We're lucky, aren't we? We've got
Yeah.
a nice home.
Yeah.
And we've got a lovely son.
Yeah.
Whom we can rely on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. without question, the greatest support we've had hasn't been from social services, it's been from the Alzheimer's Society. It's nice to know that there's someone on the end of the phone, and I know that the Alzheimer's Society are always going to be there. People have got to realise that in giving for research, they're investing. It's an investment in the future for you and the people you love. And so, really, you're not just giving, you're investing in the future.
Alright, so there's Audrey's story. Now I'm gonna play something on mute while we talk about some other things. We're gonna let this play and I'll pause as we go. So there's Alzheimer's disease, loss of neurons, vascular dementia, impaired blood supply. So kind of highlight some things. So there's, all right, so this is the important thing. So 2 types of strokes that a person can have. The type of strokes that Audrey continues to experience are what are known as ischemic strokes. These are strokes, bless you, that are caused by typically a blood clot. This can be related to, well, people can have blood clots for all sorts of reasons. Like AFib is one cause of blood clots, heart palpitations, et cetera, et cetera. So any type of irregular activity in the heart typically leads to this. So ischemic strokes, the blood is blocked. A hemorrhagic stroke, these are the ones that typically people think of when they think of someone having a stroke. Aneurysm bursting or some kind of blood vessel that's going to burst. So we'll start with the ischemic strokes. So they're typically tiny. I mean, they don't have to be tiny, but they typically are. They typically take place in the smaller blood vessels. So the blockage happens. And high cholesterol, and the risk factor. There's the AFib showing. There's a very strange female voice talking in the background with a robot. So that's why I'm kind of thinking over here. So our ischemic strokes typically lead to our multi-infarct dementia. Hemorrhagic strokes typically lead to post-stroke dementia. So there we go. There's aneurysms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So since it's here, I'll just pause it really quick. This will be a good place to write down. So a hemorrhagic stroke, so a major stroke that's probably going to lead to some form of post-stroke dementia. What are the signs that someone's experiencing this? I told Team A a story I'll never forget. Worked at a running store, and I tell different stories about this running store for various reasons, but this isn't a funny one. And I was working at the running store, and there was an older guy, and by older I don't mean like 90. He was in his 60s, seemingly very healthy. He's an ultra marathoner, and he was calling in to say he was going to be a little bit late. Okay, and I was just the one on the phone. And then, as soon as he got done saying the word late, it's as if his voice kept going, like, I'm just going to be a little, like, almost, like, I didn't know what, like, he wasn't like a funny guy, like, he was like a practical joker. I had no idea, I thought something's wrong with the phone. And I was like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? And then I heard, like the car, like, you hear the noise, like him pulling over. And then he tried to talk, and it sounded like someone, like the most inebriated voice you've ever heard. Like, it was almost in slow motion, like you could, like, and it just clicked. Like, oh, I think he's having a stroke. And luckily the manager was behind me and he got on his cell phone. Sure enough, that's exactly what was happening. So our big symptoms for having a hemorrhagic stroke, number one is a slurring of the speech. And by the way, this is just important knowledge to have in your back pocket because timing is everything. The sooner you can get to someone, the sooner you can either save them or lead to some type of recovery. So slurring of the speech, complete disorientation, so someone suddenly not knowing where they are. So now you know what disorientation means, like literally being removed from time and space. A numbness or a paralysis on one side of the body, it's happening on here. Thankfully for him, he lost feeling and he had paralysis on the left side of his body, and he's right-handed. And that's probably the only reason he was able to pull his car over and put it in park. If it would have happened on the other side, who knows, like he probably would have just rolled into traffic and died in a car accident. And then excruciating, later on in hindsight, he said about a half hour before this, he felt the most excruciating headache he's ever had in his entire life. But yet he's still coming to work. So big symptoms of a major stroke happening. There's no like perfect, like, oh, you have 30 minutes, you have 50. But timing is everything. And if you do get to someone quick enough, because what can happen is, once this happens, the blood vessels start to die. I think that's where this picks up at. If it keeps going, it can actually cascade into the brain and keep killing neurons, keep killing neurons, keep killing neurons. But if you can intervene in enough time, you can stop it in its tracks. And so your post-stroke dementia leads to an immediate cliff, an immediate decline. Whereas the other type is going to take a little bit longer. Multi-infarct is going to lead to just a steady decline over time. Yeah.
So is this type of stroke just a blood clot?
A hemorrhagic stroke is when a blood vessel actually bursts.
Oh,
So ischemic strokes are the clots. Those are usually the tinier ones. Now that doesn't mean if an ischemic stroke is in the right place, it can be huge. But those are typically the tinier ones. Now the symptoms of this. So the problem with this is twofold. One, you don't really show the outward symptoms of a major stroke. In fact, a lot of people have mini strokes and never even know it. But the signs of multi-infarct dementia is you notice a significant change, number one, in the person's ability to plan and organize their day. Like someone who used to be with it and on top of it is suddenly like not even able to function very well at work at all. They're scatterbrained, which again, this could be hidden too because all of us, right? Under stress, you get scatterbrained, who knows? You can chalk that up to a whole bunch of things. They have difficulty, there's three of these. They have difficulty speaking. You notice their speech just doesn't seem right. I mean, you've never known this person to have any type of speech issues, and suddenly it seems like they can't even carry on a conversation very well. But the third one, which is a telltale sign of someone having mini strokes, is something you might not ever think of. Someone laughing at completely inappropriate times for no reason whatsoever. Uncontrollably. So literally you're sitting taking an exam and you burst out into laughter as if you just saw your favorite movie or a great joke or whatever it is. And of course someone's like, what the hell? I don't know what just happened. But they can actually occur if it's close to the limbic system. There's a place in your brain that's connected to a humor response, and it can go off when you don't want it to go off. So we're getting there. And I think we've covered most of the basics. The symptoms, yeah, we talked about this. I'm going to jump ahead here. So vascular dementia, yes. Well, here it gets into risk factors. Of course, aging is one, but I'll just let this play out when we talk about them. So the big risk factors for both of these, the risk factors are actually the same. Oh, there we go. Number one is having high blood pressure, and these are sort of interrelated. High blood pressure is the number one risk factor when it comes to stroke risk. Like to think that if you suffer from hypertension, you're literally 5 to 10 times more likely to have a stroke than someone who doesn't. So the good news is this type of dementia, lifestyle changes are definitely related to reducing your risk of this. So high cholesterol, typically high cholesterol and high blood pressure go together. Now, something you probably can't control, type 1 diabetes. People with type 1 diabetes are at much higher risk for strokes later in life. And then two that aren't up here, I don't know if they pop up or not, but that is smoking. Smoking is a huge risk factor. Thankfully, it's becoming a little less popular. Can you imagine that? I always think of this, like, it's so weird, especially people your age, to think of this, but when I was a kid, people would just like smoke in classrooms. I'm not saying you're a horrible, evil person if you smoke. If you smoke, I don't care. But isn't that just strange to think about? Like, it was everywhere. You'd go to a movie, half people are smoking, you fly in an airplane, everyone's smoking. Like, it was just totally different. It's just so strange that it's become eradicated. And then, of course, heavy drinking, alcohol use. So I don't just mean you party every week, whatever, you have 2 or 3 glasses of wine. But being a heavy drinker continually for years and years and years increases your stroke risk as well. There's all sorts of other fun dementias associated with that. Take abnormal sight to learn about that. I think they give you something you've already written down. What they're showing you there is the cerebral small vessel disease. Yes, there. All right, so again, strokes, people don't often think of strokes as leading to a form of dementia, but that's typically because our knowledge of what dementia actually is not complete. So here's a little video to wrap this up, and then we'll completely change gears.
Your heart supplies blood to the entire body, including your brain, through a network of blood vessels, known as your circulatory system. But if blood can't get to your brain because blood vessels are damaged or blocked, or if blood leaks into the brain, your brain cells can die. This can lead to vascular dementia. Blood vessels can become damaged over time because of a fatty buildup, or be blocked by a clot, which causes a stroke or series of mini-strokes. A number of factors increase the risk of damaging your blood vessels, or can lead to a bleed in the brain, such as smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, poorly controlled diabetes, excessive alcohol, and obesity. Ron has recently been diagnosed with vascular dementia.
You can tell how he
He's
walks.
been experiencing memory loss, difficulty problem solving, and his family have noticed personality changes. However, the symptoms of vascular dementia vary for everyone, depending on which area of the brain is suffering from a loss of blood supply. Ron controls his blood pressure and exercises more, as research has shown this can help brain function. He also takes part in social activities to help with communication and memory. With your continued support, we're funding research to understand more about vascular dementia. But unfortunately, there is currently no cure. However, as Ron has been diagnosed early, he has a range of information and support available to him and those around him. 1 in 6 people over the age of 80 have dementia. Vascular dementia is the second most common type of dementia after Alzheimer's disease. More information on vascular dementia can be found at bhf.org.uk. BHF. Beat heartbreak from vascular dementia.
So all that stuff we went over last week, I just realized I forgot to bring up one thing. Oh, about Harold and PASA and all that stuff. Most of that information has been learned from stroke victims, actually. All the way that our brain can actually make up for things that are lost. Oh, just let me find one. We're not watching this yet, but we'll get there. So any questions on vascular dementia? Prognosis, I put up there, I might as well mention this to you. So a post-stroke dementia, someone has a major stroke and it goes beyond recovery being possible. Luckily for Frank, the friend at the running store, he made a full recovery. It took about 6 to 9 months, but he came back to normal with literally no signs of having a major stroke. But if it's bad enough, the prognosis is actually pretty grim. It's about 3 years. So after a major stroke, if it went too far and it's not recoverable, 3 years is about how long someone lives. Which brings us to number 2 on our list today, which is a lot of the stuff over there, Parkinson's. When you think of Parkinson's disease, what comes to mind? When Michael J. Fox is up there. I'm not sure how well you know Michael J. Fox. I mean, I'm sure you know him from Back to the Future films.
Like shaking.
So shaking, that's obviously something we can think of. Anything else? No? All right, well, let me guide you through some basics, and then I'll let Michael tell his story, which is pretty remarkable. And in fact, everything that's on that board is thanks to him and a foundation that he started about 10 or 15 years ago, but more on that in about 15 minutes. So it's hard to rank. Parkinson's is, along with frontotemporal dementia, they just make up the rest of the dementia cases that we have. Although Parkinson's disease is very prevalent, it affects about 1 million people over the age of 65. So that's a lot of people over the age of 65 suffering from this disease. The average age of diagnosis is 60. So this is something that we typically think of with an older person. But Michael, unfortunately, was one of the people, one of the 5 to 10% that get diagnosed before age 50. And this is known as, of course, early onset Parkinson's disease. Now there's actually, it's not up there, there's actually some hidden good news to this. Typically, you might think of the early onset of something as being worse than later onset, right? Think of Alzheimer's disease. Like, my God, that's horrible. It actually, the prognosis is worse. The disease moves quicker, it kills neurons quicker, and the person has a worse prognosis. Same thing with a lot of mental illnesses. You get diagnosed with schizophrenia as a child, which is rare, but it happens. Those are typically the worst, most severe cases of schizophrenia that we know of. With Parkinson's disease, it's actually the opposite. Early onset, while no one, obviously, well, you don't want it, of course, the progression of disease actually slows way down. It's still progressive, but it moves much slower than it does unless it's the average onset around the age of 60. So one thing that's not up there. And then, well, let's talk about the 3 major symptoms. And they're actually over there. We call them 3 plus 1. 3 cardinal symptoms, and then one other that's just really, really common. And the short list is right over there in case you have it written down. So number 1, yes, tremors. So we think of some type of shaking. The reason there's a star behind that one is tremors is usually the symptom that brings someone in to get diagnosed. But not everyone with Parkinson's disease experiences tremors. It's just the most common one that brings someone into the doctor. Say, look, this started out, I thought it was a tic. By the way, remember the first time I taught about this, I freaked myself out. Because sure enough, right, it's like you go to med school, you read the diagnosis, you think, oh my gosh, I've got it. I have leprosy, I'm going to die. So this is like maybe 8 years ago, and I'm preparing a lecture on Parkinson's disease, which I had never really talked about before, so I'm learning it just someone else. And of course, I think tremors, and I watched Michael J. Fox's story, at least part of it. One of his first symptoms was his pinky. Like, he noticed it would not stop twitching. It would just keep moving and moving. And sure enough, that night I'm lying in bed, and I feel this, like, my right thumb is like going nuts. I'm like, oh my God. No, right? And then sure, so go on the internet, which is like the worst thing to do. It turns out actually having a twitch in your thumbs is actually perfectly normal. And it's actually one of the types of tremors that's not Parkinson's disease. It's actually stress related. The other common ones, I'm not sure how many of you get these, but do you ever get the eye flutters where one of your eyelids, like, and again, so yeah, Parkinson's, no, that's also not Parkinson's disease. So there's several of these that are very common that are typically stress related, so that you can actually work with those. But anyway, so tremors, that's a big one. But again, remember, not everyone with Parkinson's disease experiences this. Stiffness is the other cardinal symptom. The best way I can describe this to you is through a recurring nightmare that I have. I actually have not had it in a long time. We all have our own unique recurring nightmares that we have. And this just comes, it has to come from being a runner. But every once in a while, I'll have a dream. I'm me, and I'm typically dressed like I am, like I'm not like in running clothes or anything like that. But I'm always back in my high school. And for some reason, there's a race in my high school. My high school was small, there was 2 floors, and the race always goes up and down from the first floor to the second floor. And I'm always there in street clothes running, but I can't run. It's like I'm running like in a horror movie when like the bad guy shows up, like, ooh, right? Everything is in slow motion. That's what we mean by stiffness. It's as if you want to move your right arm, but you can't. The joint you notice your joints start to feel like there's no oil. You're the Tin Man and you need an oil can. So just everything is like, oh, it's like a struggle. Like, what the heck? And then slowness. The reason there's a star behind this one is everyone with Parkinson's disease experiences slowness. And this is a little bit of a misnomer. We don't mean the person has slowed down in terms of their ability to walk or whatever. We mean in general, everything that you want to do takes more time. So you're typing away on your laptop. Imagine you're able to write a sentence in 10 seconds. That same sentence now takes about 30 seconds to type because you literally have to think. Okay, right finger go. Everything is just taking. So this is different than, this isn't slowness caused by stiffness. This is like a cognitive slowness. It's as if everything takes so much effort just to do it. Like you have to think to move everything. And then the 3+1, that's not considered a cardinal symptom, but a lot of people with Parkinson's disease have trouble with their balance. They fall down a lot, et cetera, et cetera. Coordination goes out the window. So our 3 cardinal symptoms plus 1, that's also very common. And I might as well do a little bit more talking, then we'll watch. We've known for a really long time. Well, it's up there, so that's why I'll just rattle some of this off. Coffee break. All right, now I'm back. We've known for a really, really long time, decades and decades and decades, that Parkinson's disease is related to a lack of dopamine in the brain. So the lack of dopamine, we typically think of it as the pleasure neurotransmitter, and that's not wrong. When you think you're going to get a reward for something, dopamine is released. But what a lot of people don't know is dopamine is also heavily involved with your motor coordination. And a lot of people also don't know where dopamine is produced. But I'll show you. This is where dopamine is produced, inside your brain. The red one. It's called the substantia nigra. So anytime you felt dopamine squirt through your brain, this is where it came from. So it seems intuitive to think, oh, well, maybe there's a problem. Since we're not producing enough dopamine, maybe there's a problem with our substantia nigra. So, just like with Alzheimer's, they started to do brain autopsies of people with Parkinson's disease. Sure enough, they found something inside the substantia nigra, and they became known as Lewy bodies. So now we're getting analogous to Alzheimer's disease. With Alzheimer's disease, we had plaques and we had tangles in our hippocampus. With Parkinson's disease, we have Lewy bodies. Same principle. They're plaques of proteins. But the protein has a different name. It's called alpha-synuclein. That's what that means. So alpha-synuclein is not getting processed correctly. It's building up inside our substantia nigra, and it's killing the neurons here, which means the substantia nigra can't produce dopamine. So Alzheimer's, plaques and tangles, and our neurons killing them. Parkinson's disease is Lewy bodies building up in the substantia nigra, which impedes its ability to produce dopamine. And one last thing that's not up there. And this will help explain these cardinal symptoms. So the substantia nigra is part of a set of structures inside the brain known as the basal ganglia. So it's just one. There's 4 of them. So collectively, they form this collection of structures called the basal ganglia. And your basal ganglia, its main function is to convert thought into action. That's mainly what the basal ganglia does. I want to move my right arm, I'm moving my right arm. Again, you take this for granted, it happens instantaneously, you don't even really think about things anymore. But if you say, I would like to walk through the door, that's your basal ganglia. Turns thought into motion. So if something goes wrong with your basal ganglia, incidentally, again, you don't need to write this down, but something not really related, but kind of related, the basal ganglia in children with ADHD is highly impacted. What do a lot of children with ADHD have a difficulty with? Controlling themselves, and right? It goes in reverse. They do things and like, wait. So the part of our brain that helps thought into action, that gets impaired somehow. Strange things can happen. So, does that make sense so far? Again, it perfectly describes the symptoms that we see, right? All right, so perfect place to start Michael's story. And then what we've learned, because of this foundation, we'll make a nice bridge.
Tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985? Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the actor? Then who's vice president? Jerry Lewis?
It's Sunday morning on CBS, and here again is Jane Pauley.
A time-traveling Michael J. Fox astonished Christopher Lloyd in the 1985 movie Back to the Future, little imagining what his real future would hold. What it's brought is a challenge Fox has met with courage, resolve, and remarkable good humor.
Throughout the 80s, Michael J. Fox was the personification of youthful physicality.
No, that's your head, Bob. You can't see it, but I have my hand on the edge of the couch. I'm always touching things.
A decade later, starring in the hit TV series Spin City,
Hands upon it.
his main acting challenge was to act like someone who didn't have Parkinson's.
I grab my foot here.
But in the scene, you're supposed to be nervous, so it kind of works.
Well, first choice would be to grab my foot as an acting choice, but it worked in the scene.
But the 100th episode, he presumed, was the last act of his acting career. The season finale was called Goodbye. He noticed the first troubling muscle tremor at the height of his career while filming Doc Hollywood in Florida.
And I came down to do an interview with you, and it's not like we were great personal friends or anything, but I felt that time something wrong. I came away with the perception that you were distracted. Am I projecting?
Well, once I noticed the symptom, if you come in that period, I would be very distracted.
It was his pinky finger. It wouldn't stop twitching. It would be a year before he found out why.
What did you know about Parkinson's?
Somebody's grandmother had it. It was not a thing that I noticed or thought about. It didn't even know what it was. 29-year-old guy.
Did the doctor know who you were?
Yeah, and in fact, this is one of the few times in my life I felt like saying, "Do you know who I am?" This is ridiculous. You can't tell me that. This was a case when I just thought it's preposterous that this is happening here.
His slurred speech, muscle stiffness, and tremors are the signature symptoms of the disease.
He said that you have 10 years left to work. They're working on some things. There's some things in the pipeline.
He left it with a little bit of
Yeah, a little bit of hope. But it wasn't nearly enough for me. It was I felt very shocked by it.
things like degenerative,
Yeah, progressive.
no cure.
Yeah, here. All stuff that now is just like irrelevant to me. I'm not about measuring how long something will last or how I do this and how long. It's pointless. It's just another thing you face and you carry on.
But there was a long private struggle before he went public.
I took 7 years between when I was diagnosed and when I went public with it. So I took a long, selfish period of time when I just dealt with how it affected me and was concerned with me and and I said, on me.
Lady and the gentleman would step forward, we will.
Finally revealing his diagnosis in 1998
Mr. Fox, we're gonna start with you.
and testifying before Congress.
As I began to understand what research might promise for the future, I became hopeful that I would not face the terrible suffering so many with Parkinson's endure. But I was shocked and frustrated to learn the amount of funding for Parkinson's research is so meager.
In 2000, he went all in. Fox formed a team to raise money targeted toward research that would lead to improved treatments to slow, stop, or reverse the progression of the disease. And someday, find a cure.
I like that poster. We don't just fund research, we fund results.
Yeah, that's the idea.
To date, the Michael J. Fox Foundation has raised $750 million from private donations.
Well, that's pushing $1 billion.
Yeah.
Pushing $1 billion. And it's based on, predicated really on your impatience.
Yeah. But I mean, as happy-go-lucky as I seem to be, and it is as with this as I seem to be, I mean, it sucks. I hate it, and I wish I wasn't in this situation, but it's been one of the great gifts of my life that I've been in the position to take my view of the substitute of it and merge with other people's view of the substitute of it and try to find an answer.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard this 1,000 times, but it couldn't have happened to a better person.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting used to that idea.
No one here would argue.
Michael, are you the with the longest history in this group?
Wow, I suppose so. 25 years ago, diagnosed.
25?
Yeah.
Okay, who's next after 25 years?
10 years.
10 years?
I was 11.
11?
I'm at 18.
18? You must have been very young.
Yeah, I was. I was 29 when my symptoms started coming out and 31 when I got the diagnosis.
Typically a late in life disease, only 1 in 10 develops early onset Parkinson's, like Fox did.
What was your first symptom?
Tremor.
These men and women are part of a Fox Foundation online database
We need to provide all the information we can.
where patients join researchers in the quest for breakthroughs.
You tell them when your Parkinson's started, what was your first symptom, what types of symptoms do you get, what medications do you take, and the more information they get, the faster they'll get to a cure.
But you're not expecting a cure in your lifetime.
I'm not expecting sure. I'm expecting vastly improved therapies, and I'll take that in the short term. I think that the idea of finding the eureka moment and the thing that cures it, as we understand cures, I don't know that that'll happen in the next 20 years, but I do think we'll have therapies to vastly improve quality of life for people with Parkinson's.
Yet his own struggle is never far out of sight.
How are you doing? Right now, I've been talking to you and I'm fine. I'm fine with you. But you're fighting a battle over there.
Well, I mean, I'm also interacting with you in an intense way, and I'm keyed up, and I'm excited and engaged. And so that fires up all kinds of neurons. It gets all kinds of things happening. But the principal thing is exchange. So I'm much less concerned with being still and not being collaborative and engaged. I can make myself still, but I won't be as animated.
Show me what happens if you make yourself still.
We're not talking.
I can't ever talk to move.
As soon as you start talking, you start to move?
Well, because I'm things are firing. I think the same neurons that fire my
Like you
thinking fire
described
my
it,
body.
it takes all of his mental abilities to not move.
Michael J. Fox is more than the face of Parkinson's.
Breathe.
With 2 best-selling memoirs infused with his indomitable spirit and optimism. He's the face of hope.
It was actually his books that got me out of the first 2 years. I didn't plan for the future. I did nothing. I literally didn't even have a bank account, really. It was just like, I had no idea how long I was going to be functional. But reading the books, there was a level of just ferocious positivity of just fierce optimism that got my fire lit again. But, so thank you.
Michael J. Fox is a grateful man. Married 29 years to actress Tracy Pollan, they have 4 children.
Unfortunately, I have my operation in a week's time, and I just want to make sure this is handled.
And he's still a working and award-winning actor.
Dyspnea from my kidney failure.
Do you presume there's still special things ahead of you?
Oh, yeah. Well, sure, lots. Not the least of which I think is finding a breakthrough for Parkinson's. And I look forward to grandkids, I look forward to weddings, and I look forward to books and acting projects.
So 50 years from now, do you think you'll be remembered for the Back to the Future movies or for a cure for Parkinson's?
I had a moment with somebody, and they said, I was just thinking about someday there's going to be a cure for Parkinson's, and it's going to be because of you. And it was the first time that it really struck me, and I'm not that took it seriously, but I feel a part of something. I'm not necessarily needing it, not necessarily the reason that it's all going to happen, but I feel a part of something. It's much more special than if it happens. It's much more special than any movie or any TV show.
One more. Yeah, that moment when he pauses himself.
Today is a big.
Anyway, so we'll come back to that in a little bit. So, Michael J. Fox's Foundation, what have they helped us learn? Well, they've actually now turned Parkinson's disease a little bit on its head. So, those conversations, sitting around with those fellow Parkinson's patients, I mean, you went around, what did they all say? What was your first symptom? Tremor. Oh, I had a tremor. Oh, I had a tremor. It turns out that actually probably wasn't the first symptoms that they had in common. They just never really knew it until they started having more conversations and more conversations. And it's now believed that if there's a tremor, the disease has actually progressed inside your body pretty distinctively. And so now we're thinking about what's called the 6-stage theory of Parkinson's disease. The first symptoms they now call, they're out over there, they call them the invisible symptoms of Parkinson's disease, because they're symptoms that no one correlates with something like Parkinson's about to happen. And again, the first two, the first symptoms are things that you would probably never guess. Number one is smell. So disruptions in your ability to smell things correctly, especially intense smells. I think this is so new, this actually isn't in the textbook. They always talk about like a dill pickle, but not being able to smell that distinct, like losing the ability to have that. Of course, now with COVID, everyone thinks they're developing Parkinson's disease too. So a loss of a sense of smell. And then number two is constipation. You've got upset stomach, constipation, diarrhea. So constipation. So digestive problems. What the heck? So it's believed that Parkinson's, I guess I have it over there too. This is what I was doing before you guys came in. Starts down here at stage 1 in the lower brainstem. And guess what happens in the lower brainstem? If someone has damage to this part of their brainstem, they typically have difficulty smelling things. That's actually where your olfactory system neurons are wired to. And then also digestive issues. And we unfortunately learn things when people have damage. They get in a car accident, their lower brainstem gets injured in just the right place. Now this person, everything's fine, but they can't smell anything. So we know that damage here leads to this. Well, guess what they found now in the autopsies? They started looking lower, and they found Lewy bodies build up right down here. And then they keep going, and it's as if the Lewy bodies get worse, and they get more progressive as we move up. Stage 2 is in the upper brainstem. And this leads to the second group of invisible symptoms. Radical sleep problems. So you were always an okay sleeper, at least when things were normal. But now you cannot sleep at all. You can't remember the last time you try, you just can't. You've tried everything. And then also severe mood swings. You're typically not someone who has depressive symptoms. So sleep and mood changes. Stage 3, the reason I have a green star by it over there, stage 3 is where we finally get to our substantia nigra. So this is when someone will experience those classic cardinal symptoms of tremors and stiffness and slowness. Stage 4, it keeps going. Now, if it progresses to stage 4, this is also a key hallmark. The good news is, and it kind of looks like with Michael J. Fox, maybe it stopped, which seems good. For 35% of cases, for reasons we do not understand, stage 3 is about where it progresses and then kind of halts in its tracks. Why? No one knows. But unfortunately, for the majority of cases, about 65%, these Lewy bodies keep progressing into the limbic system, and that's stage 4. And when it gets to the limbic system, well, here's our old friend, the hippocampus, and here's our classic dementia-type symptoms. Long-term memory starts to go. So if it goes to stage 4, that's when we start talking about Parkinson's. It's called PDD, Parkinson's disease dementia. Luckily for Michael, it seems to have stopped, but for most people, it doesn't. But then again, he's early onset. Did you catch what age he was when he was diagnosed? 29. Holy crap. I mean, there's early onset, and then there's early onset. He's a baby. And then stage 5, it gets to something called the mesocortex. That's what's in the light blue here. Now, the mesocortex, this is curious. You're probably not going to see any advanced memory or cognitive declines, but the problem is it's about to do something. It's about to go to stage 6, which is your neocortex, and that's the part of the brain that you might think of. And I put arrows going in all directions after stage 5 because that's what happens. It's been very focused up until stage 6, and in stage 6, the Lewy bodies spread to every region of the brain, which, just like with Alzheimer's disease, ends up leading to death and a complete loss of function. So yeah, he's hoping for a cure, but today there are two. There are two major treatments that we have. I mean, that's been his focus. He knows we may not be able to cure it, but now we're looking at it in an entirely different way. The idea being, if we're looking here, this is probably too late. It's probably too advanced. What we need to what they're trying to figure out is treatments to start the prevention, and also tests. Can we develop a test so we could take Dante? He's constipated, right? Whatever. Is there a test that we can do to detect it? Because all of this stuff, the earlier that we can treat it, the better. There's always better outcomes if we can slow the progression. The number one treatment still today, and I'm running out of room here, the number one treatment is something called L-DOPA. And you're probably guessing what this drug does. It stimulates the production of dopamine. But L-DOPA comes with side effects too. What does too much dopamine in the brain do? Well, that could lead to manic episodes. It could actually lead to hallucinations and delusions. You don't need to write this next part down. It's just some fun trivia for your next cocktail party. But patients with schizophrenia, we typically, when they have delusions and hallucinations, we give patients with schizophrenia drugs that block dopamine because there's too much dopamine in their brain, and guess what they develop? Symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So it's like you trade one disease for the other. So, but dosed correctly, L-DOPA can do wonders. And the second the second mainline treatment right now, which is, it's newer, but it works for reasons that you don't necessarily understand, is deep brain stimulation. Deep brain stimulation is when they actually insert a device. They implant a device inside your brain. Watch this. This is just wild. So this is the latest development of treating the symptoms.
Symptoms treated almost instantaneously in the operating room. You have this anticipation of seeing them come back to clinic. No walker, no wheelchair.
So this guy is having brain surgery, and of course during brain surgery you're conscious, that they make sure they don't nick something incorrectly. But it's been implanted in his brain, and he has uncontrollable tremors. And watch what happens when they literally, in the operating room, they turn it on. Like it's
No tremor is very rewarding.
On. We have really control of the tremor here.
and they turn it off, and they turn it back on.
So it takes about 3 seconds when we get really good control of our tremor.
Trying to improve the patient's quality of life is one of the most satisfying things we can do. Knowing a patient before they had DBS and after they had DBS is sometimes like knowing a completely new person.
First surgery was wonderful. The second surgery, I think it was like a miracle. They stopped shaking entirely.
I went back and they turned on the juice. The effects were virtually instantaneous.
You feel that come on?
Right now, yeah.
What's that feel like?
One side shaking and my right side just starting to shake. All of a sudden, stop.
It's not a cure for Parkinson's. It masks the symptoms. When in my case, it masks them to the point where it really had a big effect on my lifestyle.
We now have a technique that we're increasingly understanding how to utilize. You're seeing this ever-expanding list of neurological diseases in which this can be applied.
Even outside of the realm of movement disorders, people are looking at ways of treating dementia, psychiatric disorders, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder.
It's very rewarding to see patients be able to sort of return to being who they are.
I started running in 1976, but I think it's even more important since I became diagnosed with Parkinson's because if I'm running, I don't think I'd be walking. When I'm out running, it feels like I'm a normal human being. I refuse to allow Parkinson's to change parts of my life because I really don't want to.
So just put it, I'm confused.
So they actually insert it close to the substantia nigra. It's a device that stimulates brain electrical activity. And they'll be honest, they don't really understand why it works the way that it does. They just know that it works. And the old idea came from this terrible, like electro, like what's that called? Electrolysis, where people would get the little electrodes and electrified to cure things like schizophrenia. That's where the idea came from, because in low doses, that does seem to help people with some hallucinations and delusions, like not like they used to do in the 50s, where the person's like, convulsing on the bed. But in low doses, they know that provides temporary relief. And so they got the idea, well, what if we just insert, think of it, it's like a pacemaker. Like when there's not enough activity in the region, it kicks on and makes that activity happen. So what it's doing is it's doing artificially what the dopamine should be doing inside the brain. But it's just stimulating it through electrical activity instead of your neurotransmitter. Does that make any sense? Okay. That's about as much sense as it makes. So that's where we're at. Just in case, this is just a nice way to wrap it up. So if you didn't see the reunion, we're not going to watch all of this, but kind of brings it home as to what Michael J. Fox is still capable of doing.
According to my calculations, this is the year 2015, Marty. The future.
Boy, 2015, that's heavy. And all these people have got into their flying cars.
No, you know what? We never figured out flying cars, actually. We never did figure that out.
Who are you?
I'm sorry, my name is Jimmy Kimmel. You time traveled into the middle of my talk show. So,
You have a talk show?
yeah.
What happened to Johnny Carson?
Johnny Carson passed away.
No.
I did not know that.
Yeah, we did. I'm sorry you had to find out on TV. It's not, I mean, yeah, but it was quite a while ago and he was older.
Oh, TV. Are people watching us on TV right now?
Yeah, people are watching us on TV right now. Although honestly, most people will probably watch this on their phones on the toilet tomorrow.
That's gross.
It's better than not so terrible. It's really actually kind of fun.
So you haven't invented flying cars yet?
No, we have not. Yeah.
You at least have hoverboards?
They call them hoverboards, but they're not really hoverboards.
Did you achieve peace in the Middle East?
Oh, no.
Are the Cubs in the playoffs?
Yeah, they actually are. Unless they got eliminated, and the Mets are in the playoffs too, yeah.
That's good, but if you don't mind me asking, what the hell have you guys been doing for 30 years?
Well, let's see, 30 years. Oh, you know what? We invented this thing called a cronut. It's like part croissant and part donut, and they put them together, and it's actually quite delicious. Really good. I got it. This is very exciting.
Doc, it seems like 2015 kind of sucks.
Yeah. Apparently, the technological and cultural achievements of this era are somewhat underwhelming.
Smile. Yeah.